Hey besties, welcome back to Maggie Stories. What would you do if you had to choose between the man who just found you and the man who never forgot you existed?
The cafe with the blue door became a thing. Not officially. Nobody said, let's make this a thing. It just happened the way things happen when two people stop pretending they aren't gravitating toward each other. Gradually, then all at once, then with the specific inevitability of something that was always going to occur and was simply waiting for the right Tuesday. It started the week after the wallet. Sonia had a gap between her 11 o'clock lecture and her afternoon shift, and she was walking past the blue door, and she told herself she was going in because the barley tea was good, and the seats were comfortable, and it had nothing to do with anything else. She ordered. She sat. She opened her notes. He was there 12 minutes later. She looked up when the door opened, and he looked at her when he came in, and neither of them said anything about the coincidence because they had both quietly stopped pretending these were coincidences. He ordered. He sat across from her. He opened his own book. They stayed for 2 hours and 40 minutes and spoke approximately 400 words between them, and it was the most comfortable Sonia had felt in a shared space since she'd arrived in Seoul, which was information she filed away in the part of herself she wasn't examining yet. By the third week, it was just their table. The corner one, near the window, where the light came in at an angle in the afternoon and made everything look slightly golden. The staff had started bringing Jinwoo's order when they saw him come in and had started asking Sonia if she wanted the usual, which meant the honey barley tea and the small plate of chestnut rice cakes she had ordered twice, and apparently that was enough to become a pattern. "They think we're together," Sonia said one afternoon, not looking up from her textbook. "I know," Jinwoo said. "You don't seem bothered by that." "I'm not." She looked up. He was reading, or appeared to be reading, his eyes tracking the page. With the focused patience he brought to everything. He had one hand around his mug and the other flat on the table, and he was wearing a dark navy sweater that made him look like a photograph of himself, which was irritating. "I notice you didn't ask if I was bothered by it," she said. He turned a page. "Are you?" She considered this with more seriousness than she'd intended to. "No," she said finally. He said nothing, but the hand on the table relaxed slightly, and she noticed. The first real laugh happened on a Wednesday. Sonia had come in from the cold with her coat buttoned wrong. One button off at the bottom, creating a diagonal hem that she hadn't noticed, and she was midway through unwinding her scarf when Jinwoo looked up from his book and looked at her coat and then looked back at his book and then looked at her coat again. "What?" she said. "Nothing." "Jinwoo, your coat." "My coat is fine. It's buttoned incorrectly. It's an aesthetic choice." "It isn't." "How do you know what my aesthetic choices are?" "Because your aesthetic choices are deliberate," he said, still in the same even tone. "And that is not deliberate. That is a Tuesday morning mistake." Sonia looked down, looked at the diagonal hem, looked up. "This is Wednesday. The mistake has persisted." She stared at him. He looked back at her with complete composure, and then something happened to his face. Something small and unstoppable. A crack in the careful architecture. And he looked away quickly, but not quickly enough because she saw it, and it was the most human thing she'd witnessed from him, and it short-circuited something in her brain entirely. "Are you laughing?" she said. "No. Cha Jin-woo, you are laughing." "I'm not." "Your face." And then he did. Actually, genuinely, fully. A quiet laugh that he seemed surprised by, like it had escaped without permission. And he pressed his hand briefly over his mouth and looked at the table, and Sonia stood there with her coat buttoned wrong, watching Cha Jinwoo laugh for the first time, and felt something in her chest rearrange itself into a completely new configuration. She sat down. She fixed her buttons. She pretended to look at her phone until her face was normal. "Tell anyone," she said, "and I will make it loud and inconvenient." "I know," he said. His voice was still slightly warm from the laugh. "Your buttons. I fixed them. The second one is still." "Jinwoo." He looked back at his book. The corner of his mouth was still doing something. She kicked him lightly under the table, and he absorbed it without moving, and she opened her textbook, and they sat in the golden afternoon light and didn't talk about what had just happened, which was fine, which was completely fine, which was possibly the best 40 minutes of her month. The shift happened slowly and then in a way she couldn't ignore. It was a small thing, as the important things usually were. She had a seminar that ran long on a Thursday, and by the time she got to the cafe it was nearly 4, and she was tired in the specific way that academic exhaustion produced. Not sleepy but hollowed out, like someone had scooped the animated parts of her and left the rest running on muscle memory. She came through the blue door and he was there, which she'd expected, and he looked up when she came in, which she'd also expected. But what she hadn't expected was that he'd already ordered her tea, which was sitting on the table across from him, still steaming, which meant he'd ordered it recently, which meant he'd been watching the door. She sat down. She wrapped her hands around the mug. She didn't say anything for a moment. "Thank you," she said. "You had the long seminar," he said. "Professor Bay? How do you know my schedule?" She started and then stopped because she remembered she'd complained about Professor Bay's Thursday seminars twice in the past week, and he had been listening in the way he listened to everything she said, which was completely and without exception. She looked at the tea. She looked at him. He was already back in his book. Sonia had a rule about feelings. The rule was, locate them, name them, decide what to do with them before they decided for you. She had lived by this rule since she was 16, and it had served her well. It was a good rule. It was a sensible rule. She looked at Cha Jin-woo sitting across from her in the amber light with his book and his careful hands and the quiet, steady way he occupied space near her, and she tried to apply the rule. She located the feeling. She named it. She closed her textbook and looked out the window at the Seoul afternoon and thought, oh no, not because it was bad, because it was real. And real things required decisions she wasn't sure she was ready to make. The nights at the GS25 were different now. He still came in twice a week. Still bought snacks with the energy of a man who genuinely needed them and was not using them as a pretext, which she had originally doubted and now believed completely because Jin-woo did not do pretexts. He was constitutionally incapable of pretexts. He said what was true and left everything else unsaid, which was either admirable or maddening depending on the day. But the interactions had texture now. Wait, he didn't just buy things and leave. He lingered at the counter in a way that was technically just a customer waiting for his receipt but was functionally something else, and they talked, in the patchy, fragmented way of two people learning each other's conversational rhythms, about small things. Her seminar, his company obligations, the drama Mrs. Cho watched at full volume in the back room, the cat, Dalgona, who had inexplicably decided Jin-woo was acceptable and would sit on the counter near him, which Sonia found deeply personally offensive. "He never sits on the counter for me," she said one evening, watching Dalgona arrange himself with regal indifference next to Jinwoo's elbow. "You talk too much," Jinwoo said. "Excuse. Cats prefer quiet. I am a delight." "You are," he said simply, and looked at the cat. And Sonia felt the word land in her chest like something dropped from a height, warm and solid and slightly winding. She turned to the register and did absolutely nothing productive for 30 seconds. "Hey," she said, not turning around. "Yes. Why did you tell me about the childhood thing? In the cafe." She turned around. "You didn't have to explain that much. You could have explained less and I probably would have accepted it." He considered this. "I know. So why?" He looked at her steadily. "Because you deserved the real answer," he said. "Not the manageable one." Sonia held his gaze. Something moved in the space between them, slow and warm and significant. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay," he said. Dalgona looked between them with the expression of a creature who understood exactly what was happening and was choosing not to comment. Outside, Seoul hummed its nighttime frequency. The convenience store light was yellow and constant. And Sonia, who had spent her entire life being the loudest thing in any room, stood in the quiet that Jin-woo brought with him and felt, for the first time since she could remember, like the volume of the world had been turned to exactly the right level. She caught herself smiling at the register after he left. She caught herself checking the door at 9:30 on the nights he usually came. She caught herself, one afternoon at the library, moving to the table 3 rows from the reading section without thinking about it, and only realizing what she'd done when she was already sitting down. She sat with that for a moment. Then she opened her book and didn't move. Choosing, she thought. That's what this is. She was choosing toward him without deciding to, which meant the decision had already been made somewhere below the level of thought, in the part of her that didn't ask permission. There was a version of this story where Sonia had been completely single, unattached, unbothered, free as the soul wind, with no prior emotional obligations and a completely clear emotional landscape into which Cha Jin-woo could arrive like a quiet revolution and be received without complication. That was not this version. This version had Zion. Zion Campbell, 24, originally from Portmore, Jamaica, currently in Seoul on a 1-year music production fellowship that he had won through a combination of genuine talent and the kind of audacity that only people raised near the water possessed in its purest form. He was broad-shouldered and dark-skinned with a smile that took up most of his face and a laugh that came from somewhere deep and real and arrived without warning. He called everyone brethren within the first 10 minutes of meeting them. He had opinions about everything and delivered them with the cheerful certainty of someone who had never once in his life second-guessed whether he should be speaking. He and Sonia had met 4 months ago at a Caribbean Students Association event that neither of them had particularly wanted to attend, and both of them had ended up staying at until midnight. They had the same energy, loud, expressive, magnetic, the kind of people who made a room rearrange itself around them, and they had recognized each other immediately the way that type always recognized its own. They had been in a talking stage since October. Not official. Not defined. The texting was daily and the calls were long, and there had been 2 almost dates that both got derailed by scheduling, and it was warm and it was easy, and Sonia had been genuinely enjoying it in the uncomplicated way you enjoy something that doesn't cost you anything yet. And then November happened. And November had a wallet in it. And after the wallet, there was a cafe with a blue door and chestnut rice cakes, and a man who laughed quietly at her misbuttoned coat. And ordered her tea before she arrived and said you deserved the real answer, not the manageable one. And Sonia had been trying, with increasing difficulty, to hold both of these things in her life without examining what it meant that one of them had started to feel significantly heavier than the other. She hadn't told Zion about Jinwoo. She hadn't told Jinwoo about Zion. This was not because she was a dishonest person. Sonia was constitutionally honest, almost aggressively so, in the way people from loud families tended to be. It was because nothing was defined and she hadn't known what there was to tell, and she'd been waiting for the internal clarity that usually came when she was patient enough. The internal clarity was taking its time. The almost moment happened on a Friday evening in late November. It had been raining since 3 o'clock. Not the gentle soul mist, but a proper cold downpour. The kind that made the city go dark early and turned all the lights into halos. Sonia had come into the cafe with her blue umbrella, the one she was keeping, and found Jinwoo already at their table with 2 mugs and a plate of the chestnut rice cakes and his book open but not being read. She sat down. She wrapped herself around her mug. They talked about nothing important for a while. A paper she was behind on, something his company was requiring him to attend that he described with the particular exhausted tone he reserved for things that involved other people performing emotions at him. You could just not go, she said. It's a board dinner. You could fake an emergency. I don't fake things, he said. That's your problem, she said. Sometimes a strategically timed headache is a gift you give yourself. He looked at her with something that was almost amusement. Is that how you operate? I operate with full transparency when I feel like it and complete chaos when I don't. And I have survived 23 years on this earth, so clearly the system works. Clearly, he said. His eyes were warm. She was getting used to the warmth. It appeared rarely and without announcement and was directed exclusively at her, which she was absolutely not thinking about. The cafe was quiet around them. The rain on the windows made everything feel enclosed, private, like they were in a separate weather system from the rest of Seoul. Jinwoo, she said. Do you? She stopped, started again. When you were collecting all of that, the photos and everything, what did you think was going to happen? What were you hoping for? He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that wasn't evasion but consideration. She knew his silences now, could read the difference between them. I wasn't hoping for anything specific, he said finally. I think I just wanted to know you were okay, that you were still. He looked for the word. Yourself. The way you were at 9. I was afraid, he stopped. Afraid of what? He looked at her, straight and honest, the way he always was when it cost him something. That the world had gotten to you, he said quietly. The way it gets to people. That you'd gotten quieter in the wrong way. Sonia felt something behind her eyes that she absolutely was not going to do anything about in a public cafe. And? She said. And you hadn't, he said. You were exactly. He looked at her, and the warmth in his eyes was undisguised and completely present and very, very clear. What I remembered. Just more. The rain. The amber light. Sonia looked at him and he looked at her, and the distance across the table felt suddenly like a question that was waiting to be answered, and she was leaning forward slightly. She realized, and he was too, and the world had narrowed down to this specific weather system, this specific table, this specific man who had carried her in his memory for 11 years like something valuable. Her phone buzzed. She didn't move for a second. Then she looked down. Zion, where you at? Me denir Hongdae you eat yet? Jamaica. She felt the moment shift. change shape, become something different. She sat back. Jin-woo saw it. He saw everything always. That was both the gift and the complication of him. He looked at her face and then at her phone and then back at her face, and something in his expression went carefully, quietly still. I have to, she started. It's okay, he said. I'm not. She didn't know how to finish that sentence. I'll see you. Yes, he said. She gathered her things. She put on her coat. All buttons correct this time, and she picked up her blue umbrella and she looked at him once more, and he was looking at her with that still, careful expression that gave nothing away and everything away simultaneously. Jin-woo. Go, he said, not unkindly, just certain, like he knew something she hadn't said yet. She went. Zion was outside a Pojangmaka on a side street off Hongdae, completely unbothered by the rain because he had the hood of his jacket up and the confidence of someone who had grown up in actual weather. He saw her from half a block away and his face broke into that enormous smile and he said, at full volume, across the rain, Sonia, you look good still, even in rain. You're so loud, she said, arriving under the tent. You love it, he said, and pulled out the stool next to him with the ease of someone who had never once in his life been unsure of his welcome. Sit na. Me already order faya. Dem have jerk chicken here. Not real jerk but acceptable jerk. Me rate it a 6 out of 10. High praise from you. Extremely. He handed her a skewer. Where you coming from? You look. He tilted his head, studying her with the perceptiveness that always surprised people who clocked only the volume first. Like you been somewhere heavy. Just the cafe, she said. Just the cafe, he repeated, in the tone of someone filing information. That was the thing about Zion. He noticed things and he let you know. He'd noticed and then he let you bring it to him on your own time, which was either extremely emotionally intelligent or extremely strategic, and she'd never quite decided which. They ate. They talked easily the way they always did, Zion making her laugh twice in the first 10 minutes about a studio session that had gone wrong in a way that apparently involved a broken speaker and someone's cousin who nobody had invited. He was funny in a physical way, his whole body committed to the story, his accent thickening when he got animated, which was always. He was good company. He was genuinely, warmly, uncomplicatedly good company. She looked at him across the Pojangmaka table and felt the warmth of it. Real, uncomplicated, easy, and then felt, underneath it, the other thing. The thing that had been sitting in her chest since a cafe table and a question about what he'd been hoping for, and you were exactly what I remembered, just more. Zion, she said. He was working on a second skewer. Can I ask you something honest? He looked at her. Set the skewer down. Always. What is this? She said. Between us. What do you think this is? He was quiet for a moment, which was rare enough that it had weight. Then he said, Me think it's something real that neither of us has defined yet, because we're both too busy and too proud to define things first. He looked at her steadily, all the performance gone. And me think you asking me that right now means something happened that's making you want the definition. Sonia looked at him. Zion looked back. There's someone, she said carefully. Yeah, he said, not surprised. Me figured something was moving. A different last few weeks. He picked up his drink. Tell me. So she did. Not everything. Not the wallet, not the photos, not 11 years, but enough. The cafe. The shifts. The tea ordered before she arrived. The laugh she'd seen crack through his careful face. The way the table distance had felt like a question. 30 minutes ago before her phone buzzed. Zion listened to all of it without interrupting, which was the most disciplined she'd ever seen him. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Sonia, you just described a man who has been loving you quietly for 11 years and hasn't asked for a single thing in return. She said nothing. And you telling me this, he said. Which means you already know what you're feeling. You just wanted someone to say it out loud so it's real. That's, she started. True, he said simply. He wasn't hurt exactly. He was honest the same way she was honest, the same way people raised to be real with themselves were honest even when it cost them something. Me like you, Sonia. For real. But me not going to compete with 11 years. Me have more pride than that and more sense. He picked up his skewer again. Go figure out what you're doing. Zion. Me still want my jerk chicken rating to be acknowledged first, he said. And the smile was back. Slightly smaller but fully genuine. 6 out of 10. Say it. 6 out of 10, she said softly. Generous, he said. Now go home and think, she thought. All the way home on the bus, in the rain, she thought. And she was so deep in the thinking that she almost missed the figure standing outside her apartment building. Still, quiet, hands in his coat pockets, looking at his phone. She stopped. He looked up. Jean Woo, she said. What are you? I wanted to make sure you got home, he said simply. It's raining. You were just going to stand here. I have an umbrella. That's not. She stopped, looked at him, at his coat, rain dark at the shoulders, at the steady way he was looking at her, at the 11 years of quiet that stood behind him like a shadow she could finally see the shape of. How long have you been here? Not long. Jean Woo. 40 minutes, he said. She stared at him. He looked back at her, unashamed, unhurried, certain in the way he was certain. About everything, not arrogant, just settled. Like a person who had decided something a long time ago and had simply been waiting for the world to catch up. I need to tell you something, she said. Okay, he said. There's someone. There has been someone. We weren't. It's not. She exhaled. I want to be honest with you because you were honest with me. Something moved through his face. Deep and controlled and there for just a second before the stillness came back. Okay, he said again. I'm telling you because it matters, she said. Because you matter. And I need you to know that before anything else happens. The rain. The quiet street. Jean Woo looked at her for a long moment and then he said, very quietly, I know. You knew. Not the details, he said. But I know you, Sonia. I have known you in one way or another for 11 years. Something in his voice. Barely there, but present, like a frequency just below hearing. I know when something is complicated. She looked at him standing in the rain outside her building, 40 minutes of waiting on his coat shoulders, and she thought, this is the most Jean Woo thing that has ever happened and I don't have a single coherent thought left. Go inside, he said. It's cold. Jean Woo. I'll still be here tomorrow, he said. Simple. Factual. Take your time. She looked at him once more. Then she went inside. She stood in the elevator with her hand pressed flat against the wall and her eyes closed and she thought about a pajamaka and a man who said go figure out what you're doing in a street and a man who said I'll still be here tomorrow and she understood, in the specific way that clarity arrived when you stopped running from it, exactly what she was going to do. The elevator opened on her floor. She went inside. She took off her coat. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark. Her phone lit up. Jean Woo. You left your umbrella downstairs. I'll leave it by the door. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back. Thank you. 3 seconds. Jean Woo. Sleep well. Sonia put her phone face down on the bed and looked at the ceiling and said, out loud to her apartment, I am so down bad. Dalgona, who was not her cat and had somehow ended up in her apartment 3 weeks ago and never left, looked up from the foot of the bed. Don't, she told him. He blinked. I know, she said. The week after the rain was different. Not in a way Sonia could point to and show someone. Nothing dramatic had been said, no declarations made, no lines crossed. But the air between her and Jean Woo had changed the way air changes before weather. A pressure shift, a new quality of attention, something waiting to break open. He was more present. That was the only way to describe it. He had always been there. Consistent, quiet, orbiting. But now there was an intentionality to it that he wasn't hiding. He texted in the mornings. Not long messages. Jean Woo was not a long message person, but present ones. A photo of the sky over Han River at 7 a.m. with no caption. A single line. Professor Bay moved the seminar to Thursday. Small things that said, I am thinking about your day before your day has started. He walked her to the bus stop on Tuesday after they left the cafe. Didn't ask. Just fell into step beside her and they walked in the comfortable quiet that had become its own language between them. And at the bus stop he stood with her until the bus came. And when it did he said text me when you're home in the same tone he used to state facts. And she got on the bus and texted him before it had gone 2 stops. He came into the GS25 on Thursday and instead of standing at the counter he came around to the back. Not behind it, just to the side, leaning against the wall in the small corridor near the storeroom where Mrs. Cho took her breaks, and talked to her while she restocked the drinks section. Just talked. About a book he was reading, about a building his father wanted him to be involved with that he found architecturally offensive, about a memory he had of eating alone in a school cafeteria at age 7 that he delivered in the same flat tone as everything else but that landed in her chest like something heavy and careful and true. "You were always alone?" she asked, hands still moving on the shelf. "Mostly," he said. "I was not good at the performance of it, of being around people in the way they wanted. And now," a pause, "now I'm better at knowing which people don't require the performance." She looked at him over her shoulder. He looked back. "Restock the banana milk," he said. "You're going to run out by Saturday." She turned back to the shelf. "You cannot just say something like that and then immediately pivot to banana milk inventory. The inventory is also important. Jinwoo. Both things can be true simultaneously." She threw a packet of chestnut crackers at him. He caught it without looking, which was honestly offensive, and set it back on the shelf in the correct position, which was more offensive, and she stood in the drink aisle of the GS25 at 9:15 on a Thursday night, trying very hard not to smile and failing completely. She called Zion on Saturday. He picked up on the second ring with Wagwan, and the sound of a studio session in the background that he immediately muted. "I've made my decision," she said. "Me no," he said. "I haven't told you what it is yet." "Sonia," he said, with the patient affection of someone who had seen her clearly from the beginning. "You called me at 11 on a Saturday morning sounding like a woman who slept well for the first time in a week. Me know what the decision is." She laughed. "You're annoying." "Extremely," he agreed. "Him lucky, you know. Make sure him know that." "I will." "And Sonia." His voice dropped slightly, genuine beneath the performance. "You deserve the person who waited. Not everyone gets that. Take care of it." She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you, Zion," she said. 6 out of 10 jerk chicken, he said. "Never forget." She was smiling when she hung up. She had planned to do it at the cafe. That had been the plan, the blue door, the corner table, the amber light, the context of everything that had built between them in that space. Felt right. It felt like the correct location for the thing she needed to say. What she had not planned was that she would arrive at the cafe at 2 o'clock on Saturday and find Jinwoo outside it, on the pavement on his phone, and that there would be a man with him, older, expensive suit, the particular posture of someone who was accustomed to rooms rearranging around him, and that Jinwoo would be standing very still in the way he stood when he was containing something, and that the older man would be speaking in the sharp, clipped tone of a person making demands, dressed as requests. She slowed down half a block away without meaning to. She couldn't hear the words. She could hear the tone, and she could see Jinwoo's face, in profile from this distance, and she recognized the expression because she had seen the edges of it before. The careful blankness that he wore when the world required the performance he wasn't built for. The one that cost him something. The older man said something and Jinwoo's jaw tightened fractionally. Sonia started walking again. She didn't decide to. She was just moving, the way she moved when something in her registered a direction before her brain had caught up, and she was on the pavement beside them before she'd assembled a single coherent thought about what she was going to say. Both men looked at her. Jinwoo's expression shifted, something crossing his face that was almost alarm, the "what are you doing" of a person who is used to handling things alone and has not yet learned that some people don't let you do that. "Sorry I'm late," Sonia said, and stepped neatly to Jinwoo's side. She looked at the older man with the full, pleasant, utterly unbothered confidence she had been deploying her entire life. "I'm Sonia. And you are." A beat. Older man looked at her with the particular assessment of someone recalibrating. "Cha Dong-hyun," he said. "Jinwoo's father." "Lovely to meet you," Sonia said, with a smile that was completely genuine and absolutely a declaration. "We have a reservation." "Jinwoo, are you ready?" Jinwoo looked at her. Something in his face, beneath the careful surface, was doing something she had never seen before. Something that was disassembled and honest and slightly overwhelmed. "Yes," he said quietly. She looked back at his father with the same pleasant expression. "It was nice to meet you." She walked to the blue door and held it open, and Jinwoo walked through it, and she followed him and let the door close behind them, and the cafe wrapped around them with its amber light and its jazz and its smell of barley and cinnamon. She led them to the corner table. She sat. He sat across from her, and he was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Open in a way that had no defense behind it, no careful architecture, just the raw, unguarded thing underneath all of it. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. "I wanted to." "Sonia." Jinwoo. She put both hands on the table. I need to say something, and I need you to let me say all of it before you respond, because I will lose my nerve if you start being emotionally devastating mid-sentence. Something moved in his face. Okay. She took a breath. Remember the talking stage I mentioned, she said. With someone. For a few months. It was good. He is good, genuinely, warmly good, and I wanted you to know that because I wasn't going to pretend it wasn't real. But it was easy in the way that something is easy when it isn't the thing that's actually moving you. She looked at him. You are the thing that is moving me. You have been, since the wallet, since the cafe, since you told me I deserved the real answer and not the manageable one. Jinwoo was very still. I ended it, she said. Or, we ended it mutually because he is perceptive and decent and he told me to go figure out what I was doing. She paused. I have figured out what I'm doing. The cafe held itself around them. I'm not saying this because of 11 years, she said. I'm saying it because of now. Because of the tea ordered before I arrived and the walk to the bus stop and the 40 minutes in the rain outside my building that you thought I didn't know was 40 minutes. She watched his face. I'm saying it because you laughed at my buttons and you told me about eating alone and you said I'll still be here tomorrow like it was the simplest thing in the world, and Cha Jin-woo. Her voice softened, and she let it, because some things deserve to be said softly. It is the most significant thing anyone has ever said to me. Something broke open in his face. Not dramatically. Jin-woo didn't do dramatic, that was her department. But it broke open in the specific way of something that has been held carefully for a very long time finally being set down. A release, a letting go, a permission. I'm choosing you, she said. Out loud. On purpose. Not because you waited, though that matters, but because when I imagine tomorrow and the day after that, you're in it, and that's not something I've been able to say about anyone in a very long time. He looked at her across the table. The jazz. The amber light. The rain starting again against the window. Light this time. The polite kind. Sonia, he said. His voice was low and careful and had something in it she had never heard before. Something undefended and warm and entirely, completely real. Yes, she said. I have wanted to sit across from you, he said. Since I was 9 years old eating half a lunchbox in a classroom in Yongdongpo. She felt her eyes go warm. And I have been... He looked at the table briefly, then back at her, and the eye contact was steady and deliberate and full. Not good at many things. People. At the performance of wanting something. But I have been certain about you for longer than I can explain rationally, and I would like... He paused. To sit across from you. On purpose. For as long as you'll allow it. Sonia looked at him. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over his. He looked down at their hands. Then up at her. And the thing that happened to his face was quiet and enormous and private. The specific expression of someone receiving something they had stopped believing they would receive. Jin-woo, she said. Yes. The photos. A pause. Gone, he said. All of them. Except. If you say limited edition. The school one, he said. That one I kept. It's the only one where we're in the same frame. Sonia stared at him. We're in the same. Back row. I'm behind you. You can barely see me. His voice was even. But I'm there. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Cha Jin-woo, she said finally. In the tone of someone who has accepted that their life has become a K-drama and is choosing to live fully within it. You are the strangest, most quietly unhinged, most sincerely devoted person I have ever encountered. I know, he said. I'm keeping the umbrella. I know. And you're going to have to actually talk to me. Full sentences. Regularly. About things that are happening inside you emotionally. Something crossed his face that was genuine alarm for approximately half a second. I can try. That's all I'm asking. His hand turned under hers and his fingers closed around hers on the table, careful and certain and present. And she felt it in every layer of herself, this simple thing, this hand, this man, this table they had been sitting at long enough that the staff brought their orders without asking. Outside, Soul did what Soul did. Moved, hummed, continued, indifferent and magnificent and full of 11-year-old coincidences waiting to become something. Inside, in the amber light, Sonia Williams and Cha Jin-woo sat across from each other on purpose. Finally, the barista who had been working the Blue Door Cafe since October would later tell her colleague. That the tall, quiet regular and the girl with the gold earrings had held hands across the corner table for the entire afternoon, and that the girl had laughed so many times the whole front section could hear it, and that the man had looked at her the whole time, like she was the only fixed point in a moving world. The colleague said, "So they're together now?" The barista said, "No, I think they've been together for 11 years. They just didn't have the word for it yet."
Hello, besties. In this story, we learned that some connections don't expire. The people who saw you before you knew yourself, who stayed without demanding to be seen, they don't arrive loudly. They just remain. Not every lose story needs a war. Sometimes the right people step aside with grace and the right person step forward with patience. And when you finally choose them back, it won't feel like a risk. It will feel like coming home to a place you forgot you knew. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe, and share.